We want to thank our sponsors at NYU Stern School of Business. NYU Stern's Masters in FinTech is a one-year part-time program designed for professionals with an interest in finance or technology who want to gain a cutting-edge skill set and emerge as a leader in FinTech. NYU Stern is a proud participant in the Yellow Ribbon program. If you are ready to take your career to the next level, please visit us at stern.nyu.edu/MSFT to learn more. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome back to the TheMilVet Podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Aronson, and today I'm joined by Jim O'Farrell. Jim is a former enlisted sailor who went to the U.S. Naval Academy and served as an officer in the Navy. He spent the last 15 years building AMSG, which is a government contracting business. We're going to get into that today. We're going to talk about government contracting. We're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about the value of sales in a career. I'm really excited for the conversation. But before we dive in, I'd like to invite you to subscribe, share this podcast with a friend. It really goes a long way. Jim, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Brendan, for having me. I really appreciate being on today.
Yes, sir. I've given a 30,000-foot overview of your background, but it's always really helpful to hear it in the first person. So can you take a few minutes to tell us about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I am the president and CEO of Advanced Management Strategies Group, or AMSG for short. We're a government contractor. We support lots of different federal agencies, and I'll go into that maybe more later. But for me, my life has basically been one series of failures after another. I flunked out of Virginia Tech, and I enlisted in the Navy in 1984. So that's 40 years ago, if my math is correct. And then I enlisted, was assigned to Assault Craft Unit 2 out of Little Creek, Virginia. We were putting Marines on the beach. And then I reapplied to the Naval Academy and got in there. It was definitely touch and go. There was a senior enlisted in the admissions office, and I will never forget the phone call where he told me they were going to recommend me for Naval Academy prep school. And I told him right in front of my dad, I told him standing in the kitchen of my parents' house, I said, I need to get on with my life. I think I'm going to take this other college admission. And my dad was like looking at me with this terror in his face. Are you out of your mind? You need to be locked down. That's how you're going to survive college. The chief said to me, Mr. O'Farrell, will go ahead and recommend you for admission to the Naval Academy. So I was on my way. I got out in 94. So 10 years from start of enlistment to ending as an officer. And I went to AT&T where I was selling phone systems on K Street. And maybe we'll talk more about sales in a little bit, Brendan. But fast forward, did that for a year or so, and then went to KPMG Consulting because I really missed, as I think a lot of people do when they get out of the military, the mission. And I went into government contracting as a KPMG employee doing consulting work. First job was at National Institutes of Health, re-engineering their procurement system. It just felt good to be back part of a team and having a bigger mission. From there, I went to a couple of other large companies like Booz Allen, EDS, American Management Systems. These were like multi-billion-dollar companies. And then in the early 2000s, a classmate from the Naval Academy reached out and said, hey, would you like to join us? We're going to do a startup, and it's going to be selling a Microsoft application, which is code word Tahoe. And for those who've heard of Microsoft SharePoint, that became SharePoint. So we were selling SharePoint to the federal government and implementing it for them. And it was a lot of fun. And then about 15 years ago, like you mentioned, Brennan, we started up AMSG and really have been driving hard ever since to acquire customers, deliver our services, build an incredible corporate culture. If you check us out on Glassdoor, AMSG on Glassdoor, you're going to see some amazing reviews from our people. And that's because we love them. And that's who I am. I'm a guy who loves our people, and I love being part of a mission, something bigger than myself.
Super cool. Jim, we wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about corporate culture, talk a little bit about government contracting. But before we get there, I do want to ask about this sales experience. I feel like listeners of the podcast can be like, dude, give it a rest. I get it. You're like, you think sales is like important for people's business development, but I'm going to belabor it anyway. I want to ask you about your sales experience after the Navy. What was it like stepping into a sales role? And then what are some of the things that you feel like you've gotten out of that experience that's benefited you later in your business career?
Yeah, you go to AT&T back in those days and they send you out to Colorado, to Denver for training. And you, in the training, you're meeting all these other sales rep. You feel like you're part of a team. And then when you get back to DC, in my case, to get your territory, which for me was K Street in DC, where all the law firms, lobbying firms, et cetera, are located. And they pair you up with a guy, in my case, who was really old, meaning he was probably my age now. And I looked at him, I thought he was ancient. And we had this meeting, this initial check-in meeting. And at the end of the meeting, he looks across the table at me and he says, "So I'll see you tomorrow at 4:30, Jim." And from the mouths of babes, I literally said to him, 4:30 in the afternoon, like happy hour? And he says, "No, dumbass, we're 4:30 in the morning. We're going to go down to K Street and we're going to hang door tags on every law firm because our primary customer is the office manager." This is true, Brendan. This really happened. Is the office manager or possibly the senior partner because he or she hates their telephone. So I learned early on that the early bird really does get the worm. And also the fact that the security guards at 4:30 in the morning, a lot of them are half asleep. And he would bring donuts. We would buy boxes of donuts at Dunkin' Donuts and bring the donuts. And so it was very in-person, face-to-face, start building relationships. And I think a lot of rejection too. And that builds character. Honestly, being denied something that you want. Because the other thing that I would advise anybody going into a sales role is to clearly understand your compensation plan. One of the things that I wasn't very quick, I was coming out of the military. What happens in the military? Let's see, we get paid, back then we got paid twice a month. You had the VHA, the BAS, all the housing allowance and all the other stuff. I went to AT&T. I signed a contract to work there. And what I didn't realize was it was a deal where it was a commission-based, I forget the name of it, but anyway, let's say it was $32,000 a year. That was going to be my compensation. But what I didn't realize was in order to get, I got 16,000 of it, but to get the other 16, I had to make my quota. So you had to sell in order to get your paycheck. And then if you went over your quota, you could get extra. And it wasn't, but the extra wasn't very much. So AT&T really had a good thing going there. I'm just kidding. That was interesting because then you go home to your spouse who you've been married to for 2 years. She's thinking about kids in the future. We're talking about starting a family. And you tell her that your paycheck just got cut by 2/3 and you're now a civilian and you're really, there's no net underneath you. You're out there. So that's a motivator too, I would say. So sales, it builds character. It gets you in front of people. You're having to persuade people to make a decision. You're having to influence. You learn in sales training, there are your economic buyers, there are your influencers, they're the people that are the technical buyer. And I don't care if you're selling services, products, you're selling life insurance. You have these different stakeholders and you need to address each of their needs. And a lot of times they won't tell you who the other stakeholders are. You have to figure that out as part of the sales cycle. And I will just say one of the reasons I left there was not that I hated sales. It was just that I missed being part of a team. In a lot of ways, you were just doing the individual single role.
Got it. Yeah, I want to highlight for folks that are listening a couple things that I heard when I listened to Jim. You talk about bringing donuts to the person that's at the front desk. You clearly identify who is the buyer, who is the end user being the partner, or maybe the senior partner who hates their telephone, the buyer maybe being the office manager, and then the gatekeeper, in this case, a literal gatekeeper, who will not let you into your target unless you bring them donuts and coffee. So knowing your customer really well and knowing who is going to be on the other end and what they're going to want to see in terms of value to be able to effectively communicate that. I just wanted to make sure that we really put a nice exclamation point on this.
Well, let me add one more thing. So everybody you just described and everyone that I described previously, with the exception of the mentor person that they team you up with, the other players from AT&T were the installers. So the technicians that would go out into the field after you've closed the deal. Honestly, I thought it was wham, bam, we're done. I closed the deal. But what you find out is occasionally you'd get a phone call from a customer and they didn't like the way something was happening. But more important than that, or just as important, was we would take donuts to the technicians who were installing, because what would happen is they would go out and they'd be talking to the customer as they were installing it. And these guys and gals, they're like your senior enlisted They like highly technical. They know everything. They've forgotten everything that break and everything about the systems. And the same thing is true today, selling software, selling hardware. And so you have these folks doing the installs. They will give you leads on follow-up, upselling and things like that. So we would take them donuts on the way to the 4:30 wake up call at K Street. We would stop by the center where all the trucks were, and we would sit down with those guys and have coffee and talk about what were they hearing, what are some of the challenges that customers are having, so that you could take that back to the corporate.
Yeah, so staying close to the delivery of the service.
Exactly.
It sounds like it was a precarious situation where your income was dependent on your ability to sell. Nothing better to motivate you than that. But I want to ask you, you opened up the conversation, and one of the very first things that you said was that you have failed a lot in your career. I have failed a lot. In any sales role, you're going to fail a lot. It is inevitable. And really, any time that you're stretching yourself outside of your comfort zone, it is inevitable that you will fail. I want to ask you about the value of failure as a business person and as a human being, because it's something that I think terrifies a lot of us. And yet it is the most surefire way to trigger growth. And I'm just curious to hear any perspective that you have to share on the value of failure, or maybe ways that you've dealt with failure in the past.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I do think, let's see, on the one hand, I think that what we go through in the military, especially during the indoctrination phase, whether that's boot camp, whether that's a plebe year at the Naval Academy or some other form of it, if you're a SEAL, you go to BUDS or whatever. I think that what that hopefully puts inside of you is the ability to know that in life, I am going to get punched in the face. I'm going to fall down. And it's just whether or not I'm going to get back up and keep going. You have to get back up. People in your life are counting on you. Now that I'm a CEO, I have about 200 employees, let's say, that are counting on me. Like, it's not all on me, but a lot of it is, as the owner of the company, like the decisions that you make. But going back into that, I have a great story about, in a way, about failure, but about seeing someone who is so much more. And it's just a quick story, Brendan, if you don't mind. It was AT&T. I'm in sales. I get a call from the main office. They say, Jim, we have a lead for you. Back then it was a phone call, and here's the address. It wasn't an email, whatever. So I get a call, and it's, Jim, we have a lead for you. And it's at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C., where the Nixon, all the stuff happened.
Yeah, it's an interesting place to be installing phone stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Given what happened back in the day. I go to the Watergate Hotel, and I go up to the top floor and just following the address. I had no idea who I was going to be talking to. They said, ask for Jacqueline. She'll answer the door. The door opens. Jacqueline answers. The door opens. She's wearing like a maid's outfit. And she walks me down this hallway, and she says, Mr. Mars is waiting in here for you. Mr. Mars was Forrest Mars, like the founder's son of the Mars Corporation, multi-billion-dollar candy company, if you like. And M&Ms to this day are my favorite. And he's sitting in a chair, and it's not really upscale. It wasn't, you would think multi-billion company and everything, but it's very modestly furnished. And in the middle of it was a glass coffee table. And in the middle of the glass coffee table was this big bowl of M&Ms. And he's sitting on the other side of the table. I go in, I sit down. He says, have a seat. I sit on the sofa. And he says, so you're going to sell me a phone system? He immediately is in my face. And I said, yes, sir. And I still don't realize I'm talking to one of the people who ran the Mars Corporation. So I grabbed one of my portfolios. It was a brochure like this. You got your brochure. And I go to push it across the table, and I bump this teeter-tottery M&M's bowl, and it tips on its side. And in slow motion, the M&M's are hitting the glass and going onto the floor. Oh, no. And I am absolutely terrified right now. What have I just done? And so I drop down on all fours and start picking up the M&Ms. And the carpet was shaggy carpet. So I'm like, okay, I can't put it back in the bowl. So I start shoving them into my pockets.
Oh, no.
And I look up, and Mr. Mars is eye to eye with me on the floor, and he's picking them up too. And he says to me, don't worry, son. It's okay. It's just candy. And I've carried that with me my whole life, because here was a guy that could have been a real jackass. Like he could have been really mean spirited about it and thrown me out. And you came in and you messed up my candy and my floor and whatever. And he was so humble and just had empathy. And I've carried that with me. So failure to me, I thought I've absolutely failed, but I thought about it for decades because I was like, what could I have done differently? First of all, knocked over the candy, but I thought I got down on my knees and started picking it up. That's what we do in the military. Okay, I made a mess. I'm going to clean it up. That's what you do. So that's maybe not the best story of failure, but I always think about what the military put inside of me was the willingness to get back up no matter what and not give up.
Did you close the sale or what?
I did close the sale.
There we go. Okay.
It was a 2-story penthouse with a spiral staircase that went up to the second floor, which I always wondered, is that really? Oh, no, they had an elevator too. Okay, because I was like, how is he getting up and down those stairs? But yeah, it was a multi-phone. That's what you wanted in those days, a multi-phone system, not just one phone, because the more
lucrative target.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That's awesome. No use crying over spilled M&Ms. Pick yourself back up and you close a deal. So even better. I want to fast forward a little bit. AMSG, can you tell us a little bit about, give us a sense of like the size, scale of the business that you run today, and then what do you guys do?
Yeah, sure. We're definitely very much a mission-focused company. Our tagline is forging solutions for the missions that matter. We rebranded the company in early 22. We're about a $30 million company with about 150 to 200 employees. It fluctuates. And we focus on providing program and project management support. We do, honestly, if anyone's ever heard of Booz Allen Hamilton, and you can Google them if you're not in the government contractor space or in the consulting world, we're like a micro Booz Allen because we do a lot of different things for a lot of different federal government customers. For example, for the Marine Corps, we're helping the Marine Corps figure out if you were in Ukraine right now and the Russians were swarming drones at you, what capability would you need to defeat that threat? And then for the Department of Energy, we're helping the National Nuclear Security Administration, or NNSA. We help them with things, everything from administrative support to payroll. So completely different than what we're doing in the Marine Corps. And then over in the Defense Health Agency, which is like the military's hospital system, we're helping transition wounded warriors from active duty into civilian life and providing lots of different support. We keep a database of resources that are available to military members. For the Federal Trade Commission, we're doing business process improvement. For the VA, we help in the Veterans Health Administration. So we're doing a lot of support functions that the government has chosen to outsource to the contractor community. And I would offer to those that might be watching today, there is a lot of opportunity in the government contractor space, both to start a business and also to be joining a big company or a small company. If you're missing that feeling of needing the mission.
It's been a while, I think, since we've had a GovCon CEO on the show. We had Rob Schroeder. He's one of our first episodes. He's a great American like yourself. It's been probably 75 episodes since we had someone. So maybe we can just start very basic. This is both for the audience and mostly for myself. Like, tell me about the GovCon business model. Tell me about operating in the government contracting space. And then why is it a good fit for veterans? And why should veterans consider starting companies in the GovCon space?
Sure. Okay, I'll start with the negatives and then we'll finish on the positives. Some of the negatives could be that the government contracting industry is highly regulated. There's this, you can check it out online, the federal acquisition regulations. Only check it out if you can't fall asleep one night or something and you need some kind of sleep inducer. But anyway, it's all the regulations that govern the work that government contractors do. And so the regulatory side of it is a high regulation. The time to dollar, as we used to say in sales, can be extensive, meaning from the time you identify a prospect to the time that you close the deal and begin executing can be lengthy, depending on what you're selling, as usually is the case. AMSG, we focus, and I've pretty much been focused my entire career on the services side. Think of management consulting services, things like that. And so starting out, there are all kinds of websites now that you can Google starting a government contractor and you'll get like the GSA, the General Service Administration, has 10 steps to start your government contractor. You have to get your tax ID number. You have to get go on to sam.gov. SAM is the System for Award Management. sam.gov, and register that entity once you have your tax ID number, your address for the business, etc. And then you'll have to identify these are the kinds of services that you want to sell to the government. So people will ask me, Jim, how do I want to get a contract. It's not that easy. What you normally want to do is you have friends from the military, let's say, and let's say that they happen to be working for Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Leidos, Booz Allen, CACI, SAIC. You have these friends that might have gone in that direction, or you're connected to them via LinkedIn. You might chat them up and ask them, how's it going there? Do they like it? You might want to start with one of those companies, being an employee of a company. And then over time, be thinking about what services could I provide? One of the best ways to penetrate a new market and to start a business in the government contracting space is to subcontract to one of those large businesses. And that gives you a way to establish what's called past performance in government contracting. And you really need past performance in your proposals to be able to win opportunities. In my mind, it's not any different than the commercial side. A commercial company like Procter & Gamble is not going to award you a $10 million contract if they if they interview you, talk to you, you send them a proposal and there's nothing in it that establishes that you have any, you've ever done this before. So you have to be able to establish that credibility.
Awesome. You talked about some of the negatives. You've talked about some of the how-to. What are some of the positives? Like, why should people be fired up about starting a business in this space?
Sure. And so the other thing is, let's say on the positive side, first of all, it's very rewarding, as I said earlier, to be able to support the mission of our federal government. You get to see things like supporting veterans, helping veterans transition like we're doing from active duty into the civilian world, helping the Marine Corps. We help the Army at the Training and Doctrine Command in a bunch of locations at Fort Eustis, and then a bunch of locations around the country with how they develop knowledge and then share the knowledge that they have from one entity to another within the Army. And so you're doing technology stuff, you're doing management consulting, and you're getting to develop people that are in your company. One of the big focus areas for AMSG has been to do that. So on the positive side, there's the mission and then the financial rewards. These jobs are well-paying jobs. I think even compared to private sector, pure private sector without any government connection, I think our folks are well compensated, good benefits. And then depending on the company you choose, you are rewarded with some other perks, bonuses, things like that. We try to do all of those things at AMSG. So I think it can be a rewarding career from the mission side, and meaning the customer you're supporting, all the way to the financial. And then why would you want to start a business? I had a friend years ago, his name is Dave Cook. We're still in touch, but he and I worked at Booz Allen together. And it was the first time Booz Allen had ever taken their government consultants and their commercial consultants and put them together. And we were overhauling the IRS at the very top of the IRS, trying to figure out how to restructure it, implement call centers and things like that. And he gave me this book called The Millionaire Next Door. And it was basically how a lot of the millionaires in your neighborhood are guys and gals that own paving companies, lawn care companies, etc. And the theme was live within your means. If you live within your means and then you own your business and you have an equity stake, you're going to do much better than if you're working for someone else. And that has definitely proven the case. I tell our team members at AMSG all the time that I live in a house with a carport in Alexandria, Virginia. I don't live in a house with a 5-car garage. I don't have 3 boats and 6 houses and all the other stuff. And I live within my means. So that way I can give back to the team members at AMSG, share the wealth.
A good rule for life. Yeah. And for folks in the transition, I feel like one of the things that makes the transition out of the military particularly difficult is you have this clear financial security when you're in the service. And then as you transition out, you might take a job at TNT where you're not getting paid. You got to figure out how to get that financial stability back. And like living below your means is the key to providing flexibility in life. It allows you to take maybe more professional risks. It allows you to take opportunities as they come. It allows you to, there's so many downstream effects. But
Yeah.
The other things that strike me as a novice or someone that doesn't know much about the space as potential positives is the scalability. The federal government seems to have an endless need for all kinds of contracts, as well as the fact that the government typically pays its bills. Maybe not always the case if there's like a shutdown around the corner, but the days that the government doesn't pay their bills, I think many industries and sectors will be in for a lot of pain. Would you say that those are like additional benefits of starting a business in the space?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. I appreciate you helping me out here. We've been very minimally impacted over the last 15 years when there were government shutdowns. And the fact that we diversified our portfolio of customers from the Department of Energy to the Marine Corps to the Federal Trade Commission, usually when the government does shut down, it doesn't shut down entirely. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen on September 30th this year. But usually it's part of it, and sometimes it's partial within an agency. And then a lot of times the government is spending prior year money on your contract, and so you're not affected as well. Organizations like the VA, they very seldom shut down. They keep the funding flowing, and the same with most of the DoD. Yes, I'd say that the security that comes from having Uncle Sam as your customer. And also, the other thing we haven't talked about yet, maybe we will, but I can touch on it, is if you're looking to set up a government contractor business, you want to be thinking about the A, B, and C. A is your attorney, B is your bank, and C is your CPA. And I will say on the banking side, the banks love government contractors because your customer is the U.S. federal government. And they've said that to me, same thing over the years, Brendan. The day that your customer, Jim, stops paying you, we have much bigger problems in our nation. Yeah, we always get paid. We've had hiccups over the years where, say, for example, we had a contract with the Marine Corps one time, and they were getting money from the Army and the Navy and the Marine Corps, and the Defense Finance and Accounting Service was having trouble getting those funding streams to get together to pay out. It was for chemical, biological, CBRN type gear and stuff. So sometimes that there can be some issues there, but eventually a couple of Marines, one of them at the SES, which is the Senior Executive Service, got involved, and they just beat some heads together at the DFAS and got us paid. And that's the other thing is, the longer I'm in this industry, the more people I encounter on the government side, the customer side, that absolutely see the value that contractors bring, especially if you're not a contractor that's just in it for the money. And they will know that. They know. They go and they look on Glassdoor and they check you out. They read the reviews of your employees. So always know, as a business owner, you're being watched. A quick tangent. That's an interesting statement I read in a book one time. As a CEO, you go to work naked every day, is something I read. It's because everybody is watching you. Your employees are watching you. Your customers are watching you. Your partners are watching you. Are you doing the right thing? And they will smoke you out in a heartbeat.
What are some of the hardest parts of building a business in the government contracting space? We talked about some of the negatives, but
so getting the first contract, getting the very first. I think we talk about this, Brendan. That there aren't a ton. There are more and more, but there aren't a ton of private equity backed, venture capital backed government contractors that are starting up. A lot of the government contractor space is bootstrapped, and that's what we did. And so that's why sometimes I think it's okay to go and get some experience at a bigger company doing where you're an employee for a couple of years. It doesn't have to be for 10 years like I did. It could be just a couple of years. Just get some experience under your belt. And then there are some companies that I've got friends who've done this, where they worked at a company and then they negotiated with the company that they would step out and start a business. Another topic, Brendan, we haven't talked about is one of the advantages of government contracting is the government has different socioeconomic categories, like veteran-owned business, minority-owned business, woman-owned business. If you start your business in what's called a hub zone, which is historically underutilized business zone, you can get extra, not credit, but you compete against other companies like that instead of competing against Lockheed Martin and the big companies.
So
advantages.
Cool. Yeah, and then so the takeaway or the tip, one of the tips that I just want to highlight is consider going to work at a bigger government contracting business, see your way around the inside of the functioning larger organization so that you at least can visualize what the future would look like. And then I would guess, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would guess that working in a sales role within one of those companies would also help you overcome that first and potentially biggest hurdle of landing your first contract.
Absolutely. Because you're not afraid of sales, and you don't view sales as some slimy thing that is, I couldn't do that. That's beneath me, because we're always selling. We're selling. I have two daughters, 21 and 25, and occasionally I have to sell them on an idea. And so 100%. I have to sell my spouse on an idea. You're always selling. So don't be afraid of it. But you're right, Brendan. It's absolutely true. And the other advantage of doing it that way is you develop relationships and mentors that then when you step out to start your own business, you can rely on them. You can reach back to them and talk to them about the challenges you're having. Another thing that has really grown up in the post 9/11 world, in my mind, is the trade associations in government contracting and the different organizations that are veteran service organizations that are helping. Bunker Labs, they were recently acquired by the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, IVMF. Those are two great organizations that are helping veterans become entrepreneurs. They get a lot of their funding from JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan Chase is putting a ton of effort into helping minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses get started, and government contracting is one area that they're doing that in.
Super cool. So Bunker Labs, the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, IVMF, JP Morgan Chase has some resources. What are some other useful resources? There's some kind of like boot camp for government contracting businesses, correct?
Another area that just popped into my mind is, and it's related to your question, but is the Skill Bridge program. I think people should investigate that. That's an opportunity to become an employee of, say, I keep pushing Lockheed Martin, but name a company, General Dynamics, Booz Allen, SAIC, those guys. Most of them participate in the Skill Bridge program, which allows them they get paid by the government to bring you on, if I understand it correctly, Brennan. And so for many months, they
don't pay you. You're still getting paid by the DoD, so it's free labor for them.
Free labor, yeah. But you're getting an opportunity to experience what that culture is like, what that work would be like, etc. I'm trying to remember the boot camp that you mentioned.
We'll circle back to it.
Yeah,
I'll ask AI.
There are so many programs out there now to help. I was working with the Travis Manion Foundation a few years ago, and they had a transition program, and they had us all take the Strength Finder 2.0 online survey to figure out what do you bring to the table? What are some of your natural aptitudes and things like that?
Got it. I want to transition the conversation a little bit to talking about corporate culture. I feel like it's a buzzword that's thrown around a lot. I feel like people talk about it. I'm not sure I've ever heard a really good definition for it. The reason I want to ask you about it is because you were telling me at the Naval Academy Entrepreneurship Summit a couple months ago about some policies that you guys had implemented for your team. And it just struck me. I was like, man, this is a dude that really thinks about corporate culture, thinks about how he can be a great teammate to his people. Can you tell me a little bit about what is corporate culture? What does it mean? Tell me about the importance of it, both from the position of an executive and then also from the position of someone that might be evaluating joining a company.
Okay. Let's start with the definition. I read a book a couple of years ago called A CEO Only Does Three Things. And the three things were people, culture, and financials. And I'm not exactly sure I agree with the three things, except that I do like the people and the culture aspect of it. And in that book, it described culture as that thing which can never be seen, but is always present. And if you don't nurture it, you will not get the culture. You will absolutely not get the culture that you want. If you just let it happen, you will get different pockets of it but it will take different shape. You'll have one group that's doing the backbiting, up or out, I'm going to stab you in the back. And you'll have another group that's like the touchy-feely, I'm going to take care of you and care about you, which, by the way, is the AMSG culture. And so if you have to decide what kind of culture do we want, and then you have to promote it constantly. You have to have your leaders promoting it, but in order for your leaders to promote it, you really have to educate them. And they have to buy in, and then it becomes part of your selection process as you are hiring team members and then promoting those team members. You're promoting the ones that are displaying the culture that you want. And so what we did was I actually borrowed from the Naval Academy's Stockdale Center for Ethics and Leadership. There's a guy there at the time named Colonel Art Athens, and Colonel Athens has a great YouTube video called What's Love Got to Do with It? And it's just phenomenal. And he talked about his 3 C's of competence. Do I know my job, or am I striving hard to learn it? Courage. Will I do the right thing no matter what it costs me personally or professionally? And compassion. Do I love my people? And so we took that, and for the first year, we said, this is going to be our core values. And we basically adapted it a little bit, but mostly we kept it the same. And then the second year, we added 3 more C's, which were character, communication, and community. Honestly, the character part came to me from the Travis Manion Foundation and the character development and Character Does Matter programs that we were doing in high schools and things like that. And so taking those 6 C's and just talking about them constantly, and then displaying behavior that basically exemplifies, so competence. Let's take that, for example. I know a lot of government contractors out there that they hire people, they put the butt in the seat, is what they say in government contracting, and then they never talk to that person again. We know this because we hire people and they're like, why are you talking to me? Oh, you want to send me to training? Oh, you want to send me to the Adobe conference in Los Angeles? No one's ever done that for me. Why would you do that? They almost have PTSD, almost like they were traumatized by the other companies they worked for, and they come to us. And I am a little bit bragging, but it's such common sense. If you care for them, they're going to care for your customer. If they care for your customer, is going to want to buy more of what you're selling. And so it's such simple concepts, but people don't do it. And I know the reason they don't do it is because of greed. They're really just worried about, I'm going to squeeze everything out of this business I can and keep it for myself or my fellow owners. And I just feel like that's very short-sighted. So I don't know if I'm answering it, Brendan, or not, but it's
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like my takeaways, and the reason that I'm asking these questions, obviously, I think for folks that are transitioning into a new job, like what kind of culture you're going to be joining and the people that you're going to be working with will probably have more of an impact on your level of enjoyment in that job than almost anything else. You will become more like the people that you spend time with. And then I feel ideally you end up in a situation where there's this positive, virtuous cycle of, I enjoy going to work, so I work a little bit harder, so I get better a little bit faster, so I have more wins, which makes me enjoy work a little bit more. So you get this positive, virtuous cycle that I think can lay good groundwork for an awesome career. That's part of why I'm asking. It's for the audience. The other part of why I'm asking is for myself. Our team has grown from 1 full-time employee a year ago, me, to we're like 7, soon to be 8 when we're recording this. By the time this is released, we'll probably be 8, maybe even 9. And they say that the first 10 hires that you make really dictate the culture. And I'm trying to be really deliberate about the kind of culture that we build. And I have gotten some tips from some mentors, but I feel like you're someone that thinks about this a lot. And so I'm asking for these tips for myself. And so what I heard from what you said was that to build good culture, you have to think about investing in people. You have to talk about your core values and have them clearly defined for everybody to see. And then you have to reward people who are actively participating in helping to build that culture. Is that an accurate read? Would those be like 3 of the big takeaways that you would have for me?
Yeah, Brendan, I can't wait to watch this podcast someday just to hear your summaries of the things that I say, the meanderings because it's so good the way you really went to a good MBA school or something, because you're like, boom, Jim, here's what you're saying. Here's what our audience needs to know. That's really good. I like that.
I'm a Marine, so simple.
Yeah, I know. And there's that rule of 3 that the Marines have. I love that too. I would, and just to take it to the next level. Okay, Jim, so what does it mean? What does it mean to show compassion, to show that you love people? So I'll give you a story. A couple of years ago, we went to New York City. JP Morgan Chase hosted us to have our first ever leadership retreat. We've never done this before. We brought 25 leaders from AMSG, and we brought their plus ones, spouses, partners, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever. They came to New York City as well. And we were having this really great facilitated session on who we are, who do we want to become, where are we? And one of our retired Marines said, and by the way, I've learned you never say ex-Marine, you never say former Marine, unless you want to get punched in the face. So one of our Marines said, I think what we want to be is the whoopee for our customers. And I was like, oh, everybody was like, what? And then he goes, whoopee, it's either a stuffed animal, it's a blanket, a blankie. It's if you have a 4-year-old and you try to take that whoopee away from them. So we want to be what the customer will hold on to and not let go. We want to pour everything into that whoopiness that we have. So that was in the fall of 22. In December of 22 for the holidays, we sent every team member at AMSG a Vermont stuffed bear from Vermont Bear Company, because one of my things was I want it to be made in the USA. And so we got these bears, they shipped out, and this really, and I start getting emotional about it, but whoa. So anyway, so what happened was we started getting these texts and emails from our people, and whoa, they said they were pictures of their children with the teddy bears. And one lady said, I thought this was my teddy bear, but my daughter has decided it's hers. And this is her sleeping with her teddy bear. And one was a picture of a lady who had a 17-year-old son who was a football player on his high school football team. And he's holding the bear with his arm over it, and he's sound asleep. And if he knew I was sharing this picture, I would be in so much trouble. So then in June of the next year, it was December of 23. And then in June of this year of 24 for International Children's Day, we sent every child at AMSG a plush Vermont bear. And I'm not getting there's nothing coming back to Jim for saying Vermont bear, except I really love that company. They have really taken care of us with this. And then we started getting pictures of the children with their bears. And this is what I mean by love, Brendan. Get to know. Everybody always talks about, and I'm probably telling you stuff you already know, but like people always say, get to know your people, and then they'll take care of you. They'll take care of the customer. What if you got to know their spouse, their partner, their girlfriend, their boyfriend, their children? And what if you said, we care about them just like we care about you? But you didn't just say it, you actually demonstrated it to them. So it gets me choked up. You can tell. I guess I've gotten to an age now where my 2 daughters are doing well in their lives, and my wife and I are happy. And I've been stealing the Patagonia expression lately that I've seen them use a couple of times is, what if we put people over profits? And in their context, they mean, what if we put the people of the world and like the environment over profits? And in my small world of AMSG, I say, what if we put our people over the profits of AMSG, and what if we poured everything into them? And honestly, Brendan, to take it even the next level, the thing that you see in government contracting is you're working on a contract, and sometimes it'll be a 5-year, a 4-year, a 3-year contract. And when it comes to an end, sometimes the government recompetes it, and you go and you bid on it and you win, and sometimes you lose, and sometimes they don't even recompete it. They just go in a completely different direction. So what can happen at that point is you have to let people go. And for the first 20 years of my career, it was very upsetting to say goodbye. But a few years ago, I started thinking, what if we did so much for them while they were here that when they had to leave at some point in the future, they talked about us and said good things about us at another company. And then they were checking our job board on the AMSG site or Indeed and saw, AMSG's advertising, or they were in touch with Brendan's company and they're sourcing people and they're like, hey, I used to work there. I want to come back. And they love me there. Because that's another thing. You have to be loved, because otherwise we may not want you back. But anyway, you want them to come back. And so I think that's another part of this, getting away from the transactional state of things and into the more lifelong relationships, career-long relationships.
Jim, you wear your heart on your sleeve. Yeah. This conversation, we have laughed. I've actually laughed until I cried. I've not had that in probably years, frankly. And then we literally got emotional. This is a ranging conversation, which I'm really grateful for. I want to ask you one final question. I feel like you're uniquely positioned maybe to answer this. Maybe this question is dumb. Maybe it won't work. I honestly don't know. But what do you think is the value of, you strike me as a very joyful person. You strike me as someone that finds a lot of joy in life and tries to find silver linings and likes to laugh and have fun. Yeah. What do you think is the value of joy in a leader and in a career, in a professional setting, in a personal setting? How do you cultivate it in your life? You're an optimistic, you're an upbeat dude. I want more of that for myself. How do I do it?
Wow. I don't know if I can address the how you do it, but starting with the is it important? Yes, it's absolutely important. Oh man, just had my 35th Naval Academy reunion a couple weekends ago, and our classmate is the first woman superintendent of the Naval Academy in the history of the Naval Academy, Vice Admiral Davids. And it's really gotten me to the point now where I'm old and I'm looking back on a lot more of my life than I have remaining. And I never understood it in my 20s and 30s and even part of my 40s. It wasn't until my 40s that I really understood like joy and how important, how we are only on this earth for so many days. And some of us get more days than others. And the reason I say that is my roommate from the Naval Academy, John Kiner, was in SEAL Team 6, and he was doing a halo parachute jump in the middle of the night with oxygen and the whole thing. And he was on his way down, and it's pitch black. He's over the Arizona desert, I think it was, and his body went numb on his left side. And he should have died, but he had the presence of mind to pull his ripcord, and he got on the ground, and he was still numb. And just like John, the D1 wrestler, he was trying to hide it from the corpsman that was in the team with them. But they found him, they got him, and they took him to the hospital, and he had a brain tumor. And he lived for several years after that. He got married, had 3 kids, and then he passed away in 2009. And I get up a lot of mornings and I think about John. And I heard something on the radio actually driving to the gym this morning, and it was your name, something about you die twice. When you die once when you die, and you die a second time the last time someone says your name. And I'd never heard that before. And I don't want John's name ever to be said for the last time. Right now, his son, Jack, is in EOD training as a young enlisted sailor. And I am doing everything I can to reach out to my classmates from EOD to watch him, because he's a little bit struggling. And I want to make sure that if he has a chance to get through there, he will. And it's that kind of the joy now of watching Jack, John's son, struggle. It's joy. And yeah, I went around the barn there, Brendan, but joy because we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And you and others that are post 9/11 veterans, a lot of friends of mine who are post 9/11 veterans have lost people. And I think they owe it, just like I owe it to John, to live a life the best version of myself and do that with joy and put joy into other people, be filling people up. The other thing, maybe this is my final thought, the role of a CEO and a business owner, and you have 7 employees now, Brennan, role of your role is to give away all the credit and take all the blame. When stuff goes wrong, you have to own it. You can't hide from it. You have to step forward and own it, even if it's not yours to own. And then when things are going great, you have to give it to everybody else and not get tired of doing that and not get mopey or your ego is involved in, because that's joy sucking when you're just feeding your own ego. Joy, you should get joy from giving away. There are so many stories. We had a contest this year that you had to write an essay or send in a video. And the prize was, we would pick 3 people. I think we ended up picking 3, either 2 or 3, for an all expense paid vacation. And Gloria and her family won. And they submitted this amazing video of them talking about it. And she had her kids in the video, which was the secret. And the joy, the absolute joy of the second video that she sent us after their trip to Disney World, which is what they chose to do. The absolute joy. That means more than anything. So
I'm over here taking notes. I think for me, the ability to reflect credit on others and take personal responsibility for our failures, it comes very naturally, because it's always actually my fault when things don't go well. And then it's always someone else's fault when things do go well. It's easy. Jim, I really appreciate your time today. I've taken an absolute ton from this conversation. I want to ask just one final question. Where can people find out more and support your work? AMSG personally, how can people find you and support?
I'm on LinkedIn, Jim O'Farrell. I'm AMSG. Please follow our LinkedIn. It's just AMS. Our LinkedIn is where we do most of our getting the word out and community outreach and everything. I also serve as the chairman of the board of Armed Services Arts Partnership, or ASAP, and you can check them out at asap.org. I'm also on the board of the Arcadia Center for Sustainable Food and Agriculture, where we grow food, and it's taken through our mobile market system into DC to serve underprivileged communities. A lot of people don't realize it, but farmers markets are set up in places where people have a lot of money, and that's where some people get their fresh fruits and vegetables. So we go to the places where those aren't. And then I'm also on the board of 1,000 Schools, which is building schools in Honduras, and the goal is to build 1,000 schools. And we just sent a team down from AMSG to Honduras to work on a school a few weeks ago. So I'm out there in the community, and I look forward to hearing anyone that ever wants to reach out to me, jofarrell@amsgcorp.net. I'm always willing to help, especially the veteran community.
Amazing. Jim, you're a real mensch. I appreciate you joining us. Go check them out. AMSG, even my fellow Marines can spell that. So AMSG is where you can find them on LinkedIn. Jim O'Farrell. Jim, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, Brendan. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome. If you're a fan of the podcast, you would love our live events. We do happy hours around the country. We have a bunch of them coming up, and we're dropping even more of them every week. Tomorrow, we're recording this on the 19th of September. This will be in the past for folks listening, but we're going to Dallas. We've got Austin next week. We've got DC later in the year. We've got Philadelphia in October. We've got New York City beginning of November. I'll be up there for the Marine Corps Ball at Sparks Steakhouse. There's always a rowdy time. Come find us at one of these live in-person events. We're going to be doing events in Colorado, in Utah for ski season, in San Francisco, and then we've got the Military Veteran Startup Conference in San Francisco, February 5th and 6th. We hope you'll join us there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you back here next week.
We want to thank our sponsors at NYU Stern School of Business. NYU Stern's Masters in FinTech is a one-year part-time program designed for professionals with an interest in finance or technology who want to gain a cutting-edge skill set and emerge as a leader in FinTech. NYU Stern is a proud participant in the Yellow Ribbon program. If you are ready to take your career to the next level, please visit us at stern.nyu.edu/MSFT to learn more. Thank you.